Wonderful. Okay, so I want to demonstrate specifically the thing that most people are getting wrong with their X-poles because they just didn't know. And in X-pole's defense, this is in the instructional videos. It's just not necessarily in the ones that you see. So whenever tightening anything on an X-pole that goes from floor to ceiling, you will want to finger tight every one of them in a series. So the spin static has two in the series across from each other. They generally line up with the X, but it may not be exact. As you're finger tightening this, you can rotate the pole back and forth softly, it doesn't take much, until you feel that you can't finger tighten that anymore. You do the same to the other side. I can line it up, there we go. And the idea of this is, and I'll show you in just a moment, that you want the screws to be tightening onto the middle of the flat surface that they're tightening onto. If ever you've seen these bases outside of the pole, you know that there's a little cylinder that fits into the pole, but there's two flat surfaces on the opposite side of each other. And that's where the screws need to flatten, like perpendicularly onto that flat surface. And that's what this little wiggle that we're doing is making sure of. So right now I have these up here loose, so I'm not going to get too much in there. But I feel like that's pretty tight. And it doesn't even have to be tight, it just has to be flush. And then just put the littlest bit of pressure behind this. Not much, you don't want to strip the screws or the tool. Now on this 2010 to 2014 model, up to April of 2014, you can move this sheath down and you can see the flat spots that I was referring to. So the same type of method is going to be used with the height adjusting screws. You're going to finger tighten all three, just barely, in the series here. And in this case I have one that's a little long, it's just being used to substitute. And again, while you're tightening one of them at all, with either finger tighten or otherwise, you need to be moving it back and forth. So by moving it just now, instead of just tightening it, I was able to wiggle it, and sure enough it got in more. It got flush to the flat spot here, perpendicular. And I want to do that for all three of them. And eventually, at one point, you're probably going to need a second person, depending on how tight this is, to both wiggle and tighten. It might take two hands to wiggle to prove whether or not it's flush. And if you can't move it with two hands, congratulations, you're already flush. And then you can just go ahead and tighten all three of them as you would normally. One more thing, if you come around here. On all of these floor to ceiling poles, you have 1 to 2 screws behind your sheath. On the 2010 to 2014 model, you have the sheath that can just screw down, and depending on how high you are, you can see those. On the 2014 and up, this is held up by 3 Torx screws that you should never need to move. But if ever you're feeling a wiggle, and you know it's not from these, and you know it's not from these, it's probably from those, because these two also need to line up with one of those channels. And although I haven't seen this often, it's one of those phantom wiggles that people can't figure out. And the way to figure out where it's wiggling from is if you can wiggle this, and all of this is wiggling with it, but then this isn't, then it's these 3 screws, because these 3 make the relationship between the A pole up here and its base down here. But if you're wiggling it, and all of this is wiggling until way down here, then it's these 2, the spin static ones, because they're the ones that keep the base and the rest of the A pole in relationship to each other. So really that should just be it. And again, it doesn't take much force, just enough to make sure that they don't undo themselves. And you're all set. Thanks. All right, so this one is a good example if you come in closer. I'm going to wiggle this. This is on static, and the static is correct, but the 3 adjusting screws are not. So I'm able to move the pole, I don't know, about 80 degrees. And as you can see, the part that's moving is all of this, but then this part's not moving, so it's these 3. So I'm going to tighten these real quick, but I'm also going to take this opportunity to inspect this down here. Now if you look down here, come over to this side please. You can see that the issue, see how these 2 here are not with this? That means that these 2 need to be tightened, and these will always be smaller than the 4mm that you're dealing with. You do not get these tools because you should never need these tools. This stuff happens under weird circumstances, like abnormal use or miscare. So anytime these are even just slightly loose and you get a wiggle, it puts undue impact on these 2 down here that would otherwise be doing their job the whole time. And that's the only way that these 2 move, is by accidentally not getting these guys flush with the flat spot, and over a period of time of doing static spins, you just impact away from these. Thank you.